you very much, Carolyn. I appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, good. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I've been looking at the attendance list as everybody's been coming in, and I recognize a handful of you that I know I've met and talked with before. So hello to all of you, and to those of you that I've never met, welcome, and I'm glad that you're here today. And what our topic is for today is business documentation. And basically, the way I'm approaching this is to look at it from the aspect of preparation. Okay, so what do you need to be prepared for different things that might happen to you during the course of starting your business or during the operation of your business? What kinds of documentation do you need to make sure that you are maintaining? Again, my name is Paul Featheringill. I am the Region Director for the UofSC region, which covers basically Columbia, Charleston, Sumter, Newberry, Aiken, Hilton Head, and Beaufort. I'm based here in North Charleston. I'm out of the Charleston office, and I have been here since about October of last year. So I'm starting to get settled in a little bit, but welcome to all of you, and I'm glad that you're able to join us today. I wanted to give you a little bit of background about who we are, the SBDC, for those of you who might not be familiar with us or who might not have worked with us before. So we are an economic development organization that provides different business management assistance, financial assistance, different kinds of assistance to small businesses. SBDC is a nationwide network of 63 programs that is made up of professional trained advisors who will meet with you to help you with different aspects as you're starting or as you're growing your business. We operate under SBA and national accreditation standards. SBA is one of our primary resource partners. Our mission is to advance South Carolina's economic development by helping entrepreneurs grow successful businesses. Here locally, we have 21 centers in urban and rural South Carolina. So no matter what part of the state you're in, there will be an office nearby that will be able to assist you depending on what your needs are. We have over 50 professionals in our network here in South Carolina who provide individual private consulting sessions at no cost. So all of our services are free of charge. We provide educational workshops and seminars such as this one. We are not a lender. That's one of the things that I want to say. One of the things that we do is we help people get ready to apply for financing if that's what they are needing. And I say that to say one of the things that we do is we refer our clients to other partners, and we have joint services with other partners to provide things like funding that we don't do ourselves, but we can help you prepare to do. And we're just generally a resource for providing tools, information, and other resources for your business. We work with established businesses. If you're looking to grow, if you're looking to add product lines, grow into new markets, if you need marketing assistance, developing new products, anything like that, we can assist you with. We work with those who are starting new businesses. In that instance, you're going to need a lot of planning assistance. You're going to need help putting together a business plan, putting together financial projections, doing some different things like that, that will allow you to then go out and properly start your business and potentially apply for financing. So we can help you with that as well. And we really can work with all industry segments. We do have certain consultants that are more specialized in some areas than others. So one of the things that we will do if you need our assistance is we will help to match you with a consultant who will in your area who will best fit your needs in terms of where your business is and what kinds of assistance you're needing. Some specific consulting areas we can work with you in: financial management, finding and applying for financing, operations and human resources, marketing plans and strategies. We can review websites, social media design and use, that sort of thing, and give you some ideas and pointers on how to make the best use of that. Business and strategic planning, sales growth, which is something that all businesses are going to confront either starting out or at some point during the life of their business. And right now, and we've really been working a lot over the last what feels like about 5 years now, but only has been a year and a few months. And there's still a few pandemic relief programs out there for businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. So we can provide assistance in one, providing information about what's available, and then also helping to submit applications for those programs. We do have some specialty areas in exporting, manufacturing, government contracts, taking new products to market, business diversification, and also if you're pursuing any certifications such as women-owned small business, we can assist with that as well. So that's a little bit about us. And as Carolyn mentioned before we got started, I'll be taking questions at the end. So by all means, as I go through all this, any questions you have, we will address those. So basically what I want you to think about, basically the point of this workshop today is, what do I really need to have in terms of business documentation to be prepared for different things that I might face as a business owner? And there's several different ways to think about this. One is from a legal standing perspective. Okay, so you want to make sure that you are maintaining documentation that you are actually in business, that you are actually organized as a business, and that you have tax and financial records to back up not only that you are in business, but also how your business has performed, what your business financials look like. There's also going to come a time for a lot of businesses at some point, either when they're starting out or when they hit a growth stage, that they are going to need to apply for financing. So if you're in a position with your business where you need to apply for financing, there's a good bit of financial documentation that lenders of different types are going to require for you to be able to do that. So you also need to make sure that you are maintaining that documentation as you go along, so that if you do hit a crunch where you need to go out and get some financing, you're prepared to do it. Also, there's disaster recovery. There is situations that we never thought we would face, like the pandemic that we've been dealing with for the last year and a half or so. But there's other things. We live in a hurricane prone area. There's floods, there's fires. There's also, as we've seen recently with the pipeline, and any of those of you who might have had to wait in line to get gas somewhere, cybersecurity issues that can have an impact on your business. So I'll be going into more detail on all of these, but these are all things you want to think about from a documentation perspective of, am I really prepared in each of these instances to deal with whatever might come along? And so really to kind of sum that up, there's 3 levels of protection for yourself that you want to think about in terms of documentation. One is your legal structure, your legal status as a business. The other is financial documentation, and then also personal documentation that you want to keep in mind, that you want to make sure you have at your fingertips as well. And I'll discuss each of these in a little bit more detail. So let's start out with the legal documentation. As I mentioned, when we first started out, we have been helping a lot of businesses go through and apply recently for some of the COVID relief programs that have been made available by the government. And, one of the primary things to start out that they're going to look at is some legal documentation that you are actually organized as a business, that you are actually operating as a documented business. And you'd be surprised. There are a lot of people out there who are not. The fact that you are selling a product or service and that you are making money off of doing it is great. That means that you're in business, but that doesn't mean that you are legally recognized as a business for purposes of applying for financing or doing anything like that. So what do you have to do that? Well, there's some different aspects of this, and I'm really going to kind of take 2 approaches to this. One is to tell you what kind of documentation you need to have. The other is to kind of give you some insight to think about as you are structuring your business and as you are actually starting your business, what kinds of considerations do you need to have? And one is what your business organization is going to be. And there's a number of different options that you have. Most people set up either as they incorporate as an LLC or some kind of corporate structure, either an LLC, an S corporation, something like that, or they operate as a sole proprietorship. Now, if you are going to incorporate as an LLC, S corporation, something along those lines, which typically is what we recommend for businesses, although I will say, stay tuned, because in the future we are going to offer some training on the different kinds of business structures and which one might make the most sense for you. But if you are going to be incorporating as a business, then you need to get certification through the South Carolina Secretary of State. I've put their website here. You need to file online, or you can file online. You can go to the office in Columbia and file in person, but it's much more direct to file online. It's $100 to file. And so, what that'll do is that will, number one, make sure that you are properly registered with the state to conduct your business. And it also will, if anybody needs verification for applying for financing, applying for relief programs, anything like that, you can then go to the Secretary of State on their website, and they will send you what's called a certificate of existence, which you can then show to these folks to prove that you are actually structured as a legal entity. Another thing that you have to file that goes along with this is what's called your articles of organization. It's not really as complicated as it sounds. There's a form that you fill out on the website of the Secretary of State. And basically what it is all the legal information that the state needs to have about your business: name, address, owner information, that sort of thing. Now, one of the questions we get a lot is, if I am operating as a sole proprietorship and not as some type of corporation, do I have to file with the Secretary of State? The answer is no, you do not. However, there are other licensing considerations that you have to keep in mind if you are going to organize as a sole proprietorship. So if you're going to organize as a corporation, you need to file through the Secretary of State. If you are, regardless of the kind of business you are also required to have a business license. Now, the business license, South Carolina does not have a general statewide business license that you have to get. Each county and some cities have their own individual requirements for what kinds of business licenses you need to have. And this is true whether or not you are organized as some kind of corporation or whether or not you are organized as a sole proprietorship. You still have to have a business license. So what we always recommend is, if you're going to operate as a sole proprietorship, or even if you're going to organize as a corporation, you need to visit your local business license office. For example, here locally, there's one for the city of Charleston, there's one for Charleston County. So you're going to want to make sure that you get all the proper licenses, and we can help you with those contacts and everything to make sure that you're contacting the right people. But in addition to your legal status with the state, you also need to have a business license that you obtain from the individual cities and counties. And one of the things to keep in mind with that is, it's not only the city or county that you're based in that you're going to be required to get a business license from. You're also most likely going to be required to get one from whatever county you are going to do business in. So in other words, let's say you set up a business in Charleston County, you plan to have locations in both Charleston and Berkeley County. Then you're going to need business license. Well, Berkeley County is a bad example. Let's say Charleston and Dorchester County. You're going to need to have business licensing for both. Berkeley County is a little bit different. Again, we can help you, kind of find the right places to go with these individual counties to get the proper licensing that you need. Another thing that you're going to have if you plan to hire employees and pay them, which I assume that most all of you will, is an employee identification number or a taxpayer identification number. You'll sometimes see it as an EIN or a TIN that you obtain from the IRS. And this is the website for the IRS that you can go to then apply for one of those. And we will, and I should have said this from the beginning, we will be sharing these slides with you. What'll happen is you'll be sent a survey after the session is over. And as long as you fill out the survey and return it to us, we will share a copy of these slides with you so that you will have access to the websites and all that sort of thing.
Paul, also, I would like to mention we are recording this. So we hope to have the recording placed on the state website within about 7 to 10 days. So those of you who have asked if they have permission to record it, you can certainly do so, but we're recording it as well.
Thank you. Another thing that you want to have is what's called your NAICS code, which stands for North American Industry Classification System. And you might be saying to yourself, okay, what is this and why do I need this? Basically what it is that every type of business is assigned a different kind of code. And so when you're applying for different kinds of federal programs, we saw it specifically with COVID relief. For example, if you wanted to apply for the shuttered venue operator grant or other things along those lines, they're oftentimes limited to certain types of businesses. And the way you show that, the way you document that is by having your NAICS code available. And so what I would recommend, and you also need to have it available for, applying for different kinds of certifications and different things like that. So what you can do is you can go to this website and you can determine what your NAICS code is. So it's not something that's specifically assigned to you individually. What it is it's based on the individual type of business that you're in. So there's different things, for example, that if you're a restaurant, there's different kinds of codes related to that. If you're a construction company, there's different codes related to that. But definitely what you want to do is you want to go on and you want to find out what your code is, and you want to have some kind of documentation of that so that you know what it is when it comes to applying for different kinds of things. Insurance. I oftentimes get the question, am I required to have business insurance? And what I will say is please, 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 yes, have business insurance. Because what happens is you are, when you start a business, whether it is a brick and mortar where you actually have a location where you conduct your business, or if it is something that you're operating out of your home, if it's an online business, something like that, regardless of what it is, you open yourself up to certain types of liability at that point, whether it is, somebody falls in your store and gets injured and they might want to file suit against you. It could be that somebody has a problem with one of your products or gets injured or something and they want to file suit against you. So you definitely want to have business insurance. The other thing that you want to consider when you're looking at business insurance is different kinds of loss insurance related to your inventory and different things like that for different things that you might have related to fire and flood and all that sort of thing. And one of the other things that you're going to want to keep in mind is that a lot of times if you own a space that you're conducting your business out of, then of course you're going to be required to have insurance on that property, just like you do on your home. If you are renting a space, read your lease very carefully, because a lot of times your landlords will require you to have different levels of insurance for your business so that if something happens, they're not liable for it. Your insurance covers it. So please talk to an insurance agent and really work with them to figure out what kinds of insurance you need to have. And one of the things that I want to mention specifically, I made a note of this in the here on this slide, that we see a lot, particularly in this area in the Low Country, is a lot of places require flood insurance. So a lot of times I know that different landlords will require it based on where you're going to be located. And I know that, for example, if you get a loan from the SBA of some sort, 7A, 504, microloan from any kind of lender, if you get a loan from the SBA, a lot of times they're going to require you to have flood insurance depending on where you're located. So just something else to keep in mind, but I would definitely suggest that you have an insurance agent that you sit down and talk with. And I will mention that we have resource lists in all of our offices here in the region, for all of our offices here in the region, where if you're not sure who would be a good contact for you in terms of insurance agents, financial resources, anything like that, we can certainly send you lists of people that our clients have worked with in the past that might be ones that would be good for you to talk to. Any kinds of agreements you have with vendors, with anything like that, you're going to want to keep copies of those. If you do have any certifications, be they women-owned small businesses, minority-owned small businesses, veteran-owned small businesses, anything like that, keep copies of that, because a lot of times you will be asked to provide copies of those certifications. And then a business plan. You know, if you have a plan for your business and any kind of projections, financial projections, anything like that, keep that on hand as well, because when you are going to apply for any kind of business financing or anything like that, a lot of times they will ask you for a copy of that. And if you don't have a business plan or projections, I would strongly encourage you to work on that. And I'm going to put in another plug for our services. We have a ton of really, really great consultants here at the SBDC who are more than happy to sit down and help you put one together. So that's one side of it. That's legal documentation. And so what I'm encouraging you with that is, don't just get all those things, but keep copies of all those things and have them available to you. You know, keep them in a safe deposit box, keep them in a lockbox or something somewhere in your business or in your home. Have them available to you so that if somebody asks you for your certificate of existence from the state, or your business license, or your insurance policy, or anything like that, make sure that you have it on hand so that you can provide it, because there will be times where you're going to be asked for that. Okay, so that's one aspect of it. The next aspect of it is financial information. So in addition to your legal information, what kind of financial documentation or information should you have on hand? And really, there's a key question that you need to ask yourself here, and that we can help you figure out, is how are you tracking your business finances? Because again, you know, as we work with people on applying for different kinds of financing, be it from a bank or some other lender, or be it from a you know, anything related to the pandemic that we've been helping people on, you're going to have to show them some kind of documentation of your business finances. And one of the things that we found is that sometimes businesses struggle with doing that. And one of the other things that I'll give you a pitch for here, free of charge, is, you know, make sure to start from the beginning. Okay, if you are relatively new in business, or you're not in business yet, but you're thinking about going into business, start setting up how you're going to track your finances early. Start that from the beginning, and that'll be something that will pay off for you throughout the life of your business. And that's something we can help you figure out the best way to do if you're not exactly sure. If you're already in business and you're not really doing much of this stuff, again, come see us and we can help you figure out the best way to do it. So how are you tracking your business financials? A lot of people are using ledgers or Excel sheets, something like that. If you are, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure that you're keeping copies of all of that somewhere, either digitally or, you know, paper copies that you keep in, as I mentioned, a safe deposit box or something. If you're using QuickBooks or some kind of program like that, and you are generating profit and loss, balance sheet, that sort of thing, make sure that you are keeping copies of those and keeping them backed up somewhere, either digitally or paper copies. Bank statements. Make sure that you're keeping copies of your bank statements. A lot of times they're available online. If they are, that's great. Just make sure that you have access to bank statements. statements. And I'm going to put in a plug here as well that, make sure that you set up a separate account for your business from your personal account, because a lot of times what people will do is, when they start a business, they will just start taking whatever they make off the business and depositing it into their personal bank account and paying personal bills out of it. Well, the problem with that is that when you go to apply for some kind of financing, for example, and I'll just use an example here, like the payroll, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the economic injury loans that SBA has been offering with the COVID relief. You have to be able to document your business's financial performance, and they do allow bank statements as a way to do that, but you have to be able to show that they are business bank statements and not just personal bank statements. So make sure that you are separating those two out. Any kinds of cash flow reports that you're generating out of your tracking system, make sure that you're keeping copies of those. Tax documents. Okay, so any tax returns that you have, make sure that you're keeping copies of those. Keep your personal tax returns and your business tax returns, because a lot of times lenders are going to want to see both. So, there's a couple of different ways you can look at this, because depending on how you have your business organized, sometimes you will file a separate corporate return for your business, but sometimes, a lot of times, it's just going to be what's called a Schedule C, which is going to be a page on your personal tax return. Either one of those is absolutely fine, depending on what kind of business you have, but just make sure that you're keeping copies of all those, because any kind of financing that you apply for or any kind of relief that you apply for, they're going to ask you for profit and loss, balance sheet, bank statements, and tax documents. And most likely, they're going to ask you for at least 3 years worth. So make sure, as you're thinking about how you're maintaining these records, make sure that you're keeping at least 3 years worth of records that you can then produce for a lender or anyone else who might need this. Loan documents. So if you have any loans from any other sources, make sure that you're keeping copies of those documents, because if you go to get any additional financing, any kinds of relief programs, anything like that, they're going to want information on any other loans that you have. So make sure that you're keeping copies of that. Business insurance, I already gave my stump speech on that, but make sure that you're keeping copies of your business insurance. Keep lists of your equipment and your inventory, okay? Because worst case scenario, let's say that you have a flood or a fire or something like that, and you then need to go make a claim on your insurance, or you need to get any kind of financing to replace equipment, inventory, anything like that. They're going to need documentation of what it was that you had that you lost. And one of the things that you can do is, I know in QuickBooks, if you're using that, you can actually track in there your inventory, your equipment, different things like that. But even if you're not, even if you're using an Excel sheet or a ledger, something like that, make sure that you are keeping track of what inventory and what equipment you have, so that if you need to replace it, you can. Make sure to keep copies of your lease, so that, oftentimes that's something else that a lender or that a lender is going to want to see, because, for example, if you go to a lender to get a loan and you say, well, I'd like to get, let's say, a 10-year term on it. Well, they might ask to see a copy of your lease so that they can see how long you're going to be able to stay in that location. Because, if you've only got a 3-year lease, it's hard to get a 10-year loan. So, those are the kinds of things you want to make sure that you have copies of your lease. If you're leasing any equipment, make sure that you have copies of those as well, so that if anything happens to any of that equipment and you need to replace it, you've got a copy of the lease and you know how to do that. And any large equipment purchases that you make where, you know, something might happen to them and you might need to replace them, like especially vehicles or anything like that. If you buy them or if you're leasing them, make sure you keep copies of those receipts and those leases so that you can, if you do need to document them for insurance purposes or anything else, that you're able to do that. And I know that a lot of this seems like common sense, but you know, these are the kinds of things, you know, for example, when you go to apply for a loan, like at the lender that I used to work at, you know, first thing we'll ask you for an application, and then we're going to ask you for a whole other long list of documentation that you're going to need to provide to be able to put a loan package together. And so, you know, if you're already in business, they're going to ask you for ledgers, Excel sheets, profit and loss, balance sheet, bank statements, cash flow statements, tax documents. You're going to have to provide all of these things. If you're a startup, you're going to have to provide personal tax information. You're going to have to provide business plans. You're going to have to provide all these things. And so you want to make sure that you have them on hand and available so that you don't get into a situation where you have to go back and try to recreate these things that you haven't already had. Now, if you do get into that situation where you find that you need to catch up on your documentation and to put together some of these things that you haven't done before, keep in mind that we are here to help. And, you know, we have some different templates and things like that that we can offer to help you do it. And this is kind of what I talked about without advancing my slides, so I'm sorry about that. But let's say you are, you know, as one scenario, let's say you are going to apply for a loan for your business. What sorts of documentation do you need? Business plan, as I mentioned, especially if you're a startup, 3 years of projections, personal financial statement. They're going to look at your personal financial situation and financial history as well as your business. Especially if you're a startup and you do not have business financial history, they're really going to rely on your personal financial history. So make sure you have a personal financial statement. Make sure you can access personal credit and you know what your personal credit looks like. Have a copy of your resume. You know, a lot of times when you're applying for financing, they will want to see, you know, what you've done in the past. You know, what kinds of experience do you have in this industry? Keep business and personal tax documents, as I mentioned, profit and loss, balance sheet, bank statements, personal and business. Excuse me. Any cash flow reports or documentation that you have, loan documents for any existing loans. And another thing you want to think about having on hand is a collateral list, because so if you go to apply for financing, excuse me, one of the questions that you're going to get asked is, what do you have that you can offer as security or as collateral for this loan? If you're not in business already, they're going to look at things like your personal residence, your personal vehicles, you know, if you have any stocks or bonds or retirement or CDs or anything like that. These are all things that lenders can potentially look at as collateral. If you are in business, they can look at things like your equipment, your inventory, anything that is related to your business. So what I would suggest that you do before you go try to apply for a loan is put together a list of what it is that you have, both through your business and personally, that you could potentially use as collateral, and put down what you think the value is, so that if you're asked for that, that's something that you would be able to produce. So loan application is one scenario where you might need to think about having different kinds of documentation on hand. Another is disaster preparedness, you know, and this can be, you know, as I mentioned, not just things like the pandemic, but, you know, as I mentioned, we live in a hurricane prone area, we live in a flood prone area, you know, there's different things like this. So number one, I've mentioned insurance before. Make sure you know what you're covered for. And do you have flood insurance? Is your inventory covered? Make sure that not only do you have these kinds of insurance, but that you know what you're covered for, and that you keep copies of everything, so that in the event of a disaster or some kind of situation, you're able to file those claims, and you know what you're able to get, what's covered. Make sure that you have a copy of your lease, so that if something happens to your space, that you have a copy of your lease, so that you know what's my responsibility and what's the landlord's responsibility. And this is a little aside I'm going to give you. So when it comes to renting a space for your business, so what's going to happen is when you go to, and some of you might have had this experience, when you go to get to rent a location, your landlord is going to give you a lease that a lot of times is going to be somewhere between 20 and 50 pages long. And there's going to be a lot of stuff in there that you're not necessarily going to understand what it means. And so what I want to encourage you is to understand that, your landlord's motivation is to protect themselves. Your motivation is to protect yourself and make sure that you understand everything that's in that lease and everything that you're responsible for. So make sure that I will advise you that it is money well spent before you sign a lease, to take that lease to an attorney and have them review it for you and make sure that you understand everything that you are responsible for. For example, some of you might be familiar with this. If you sign what's called a triple net lease, that means that you are responsible for not only paying your rent, but you are responsible for all of the taxes and insurance that the landlord has to pay on that building. He or she is going to charge you for those, so you're responsible for that as well. Just make sure that you understand what's in your lease and what you're responsible for. For example, if there's a flood, is it your responsibility through your insurance, or is it your landlord's responsibility through their insurance? If there's a fire, who's responsible for it? These are all things that you want to make sure that you are aware of. So, end of next soapbox. Make sure that you have an inventory list, as I said, so that if you have any loss of inventory, inventory and equipment both, make sure that you have a list of both of those, anything that you have, so that if there's any sort of loss, you can then file on your insurance to make up for that. If you're operating off of paper files, say for employee records or contracts with vendors or anything like that, make sure that you have copies of them, and make sure that you keep them somewhere where they're safe, so that if something happens and you need to get copies of them, you have them. If you are, and I would say the same thing for bank records. If you're keeping paper bank statements, make sure that you are keeping copies of those and you're keeping them somewhere where you can access them. Now, a lot of people are keeping records of things digitally. They're keeping them electronically. That's great. If you're doing that, make sure if you're doing that, that you're backing them up somewhere. So in other words, if you are, if you're only operating through QuickBooks and you're not printing anything, if you are only referring to your bank statements online, if you're keeping records on like a server or on your computer or something like that, make sure that you're backing all of that stuff up. A lot of times you can back them up to different kinds of cloud platforms. Apple's got iCloud. There's other ones that are out there that you can use. There's little hard drives that you can, or little external drives that you can buy for cheap that have a lot of storage space on them, where you can back stuff up on them and keep them safe. Make sure that you're backing all that stuff up, because there's a couple of different things that can happen with your computers. One is, sometimes they get old and they die, and you have to replace them. You can also have some kind of cybersecurity issue where, maybe something gets hacked and you need to recreate it. So just make sure that you have some kind of system or some kind of platform where you're backing that stuff up. up if you're keeping all of your records electronically, so that you know that you have access to it somewhere if you need it. So if your computer dies and you have to go out and buy a new one, do you have access to all of your business information somewhere where you can replace it? If somebody hacks into your computer and you're no longer able to use it and you have to replace it, can you access your business records where you can get to them? And that's what I mean when I say consider storage options. So if you have paper files and you're making copies of it, consider getting a safety deposit box, or keeping them in your home or someplace different, so that if something happens to your primary place of business, you have copies somewhere. If you are storing things digitally, make sure that you have a cloud backup or a server, or there's all kinds of different options that you can get to back stuff up, but just make sure that you have one. And again, if you need some pointers on that, we can help you do that. I also wanted to mention personal information, personal documentation that you want to make sure that you have. Make sure that you have some kind of personal identification, be that a driver's license or ID card or something like that. Make sure you have a social security card somewhere to be able to document your social security number. Make sure that you have a copy of your birth certificate and a copy of your bank information, both personal and business. And you might be saying to yourself, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Well, for a lot of different kinds of applying for financing for your business and for filing insurance claims and that sort of thing, they're going to want to look at your personal information. They're going to want verification of your personal identification as well. For example, when with the Paycheck Protection Program and some of that kind of stuff, they asked you for a copy of your ID and they asked you for verification of your social security number, as I recall. So those are things that you want to make sure that you have available, so that if you're asked for that, you are able to produce it. So if you need help, this is our website, SCSBDC.com. You can go on here and sign up to request counseling. This is my contact information. As I mentioned, we are going to send you a copy of the slides. If you complete the survey, we'll make that available to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll make myself available to meet with you, to help you through any of this. If not me, we have plenty of other people on staff who are experts who can help you. So I have been talking for about 45 minutes or so, so I wanted to leave a little bit of time at the end to take any questions that anybody might have. So I will open it up for questions.
All righty, Paul. Well, I will go ahead and thank you, Robert. You have been answering some of the questions in the chat box as we go along. Robert Jones is another one of our business consultants based here out of the Charleston, South Carolina office, but we are all throughout the network here for your assistance or to assist you. So let me get to some of the questions, Paul. Give me just one moment.
Sure.
So from Sherry, thank you, Sherry. How does this work with online sales and e-commerce? And I think that was mostly about when you were talking about maintaining tax documents and transaction documents.
Right. So there is, you still, even if you are an online business, you're still going to want to maintain the same level of, financial documentation in terms of, tracking your business financials, your tax returns, all those sorts of things. As far as business structure, now state laws vary from state to state. If you are going to be conducting a business that is online and is in different states. So you're going to want to check with any state that you are looking to do business in. But I know at least with South Carolina, you're still going to have business license requirements and different things like that. So, and you actually can, if you go on to the website for the Secretary of State's office, they have information on there on setting up a filing as an online business and what kind of filing you are going to want to do for tax purposes. But as far as a lot of the other things like establishing an LLC, how you're going to file your taxes, all that, most of that is the same, whether you're an online business or brick and mortar.
Thank you, Paul. And talking about the business license section, Margaret had a question. Do you need a business license for online business, which is not a brick and mortar?
Yes, again, it varies some from state to state. If you go, at least for South Carolina, if you go on the Secretary of State's website, they have a section on what they call a, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, but it's something like a general state business license that they intend for online businesses that are going to have customers and be doing sales in South Carolina, because you still have to pay taxes on those things. And so, you know, they still are going to have a registration requirement for that. But yes, there is some licensing required, and I can talk with you more specifically offline about what that would look like if you would like to.
Thank you. And here's a question from Nancy. How long should I keep, 1, employee records after termination, and 2, tax records? And do I need to keep originals, or can I keep a PDF record?
Yes, you can keep a PDF record. I mean, I personally prefer keeping originals, but you don't have to. You certainly can keep a PDF record. That's absolutely fine. As I mentioned, you know, most lending sources are going to request at least 3 years of tax returns. So generally for myself, as a rule of thumb, I would say at least 5 years you want to maintain, because generally that is a pretty good window in terms of, you know, not just for IRS purposes if they come back to look at something, but also for any kind of financing. It's generally 3 years, but some of them might go a little longer. So I would suggest with the tax information, keeping at least 3 years. I mean, I'm sorry, 5 years. With employee documentation, I don't really have a set number on that, but I would think at least 3 to 5 years would be a good rule of thumb for that as well. Most organizations that I've seen before, most government organizations and things like that, they have different kinds of retention schedules for how long you have to keep things like reports and financial information and that sort of thing. And typically it's somewhere in the 3 to 5 year range.
Thank you, Paul. Let's see. And again from Margaret, what type of personal financial statements are you referring to?
Most lenders are going to require what's called it's actually called a personal financial statement. You can find a copy of one online, and you can also get a copy of one from any lender that you're going through, that you're going to go to seek financing. But I would also recommend that you keep copies of your personal bank information, so that you have access to your personal financial history that way as well. At least for a few years. You know, I mean, you don't, again, you know, I kind of use a rule of thumb of at least 3 to 5 years. Now for that, you know, for bank statements, you know, I might not want to keep it quite that long, at least on paper, but you're at least going to want to have a couple of years worth of bank statements available to you.
I'm going to field this next question. It comes
Please.
from Beth. Are there mentors available for different types of businesses? The first thing I'll share with you is we don't generally use the term mentor. We use the term business consultants, and we don't have specific business consultants for specific businesses. We do have some people that specialize in certain things like importing and exporting and manufacturing, but all of our business consultants have a very in-depth general business consulting knowledge. So depending on where your location is, and the people within that region, most anyone within that area could assist. And Beth, what I'll do is I'll look in your registration, see where you're located, and I can certainly give you a suggestion of who might be best for you. The next question comes from Dean. Before I hire my first employee, I would like to know and have set up and practiced all of the paperwork associated with payroll taxes, business taxes, so that there is no delay to paying that employee and no tax penalties. I'm a little intimidated by the process. Who at SBDC can help get this kind of training and practice at employee payroll related documents? Also, who can give me non-payroll type documents, knowledge, experience before I hire the first employee?
Well, thank you. First of all, sure. Yeah, I mean, we have a number of people here on staff who would be happy to sit down and talk with you, talk you through what kinds of things that you would need from a documentation perspective. There's some things from a documentation perspective, like I mentioned, the EIN. That's something you want to do from the very beginning if you know that you're going to be hiring employees, so that you can be set up to do that. There's other things that you want to think about that can be part of your business planning process in terms of, who do I want to hire, in terms of, what kind of employees do I think I need to have? What do I want them to do? What kinds of experience do I want them to have? These are all things that we can help you kind of think through and work through, not so much from a documentation perspective, but just from a, understanding and knowing, what kinds of employees that you're going to want to have, because then that's going to determine, well, okay, how do I hire these employees? Where do I go to find them? And so then you can start looking at things like job descriptions and different things like that, and we can point you in some directions on that as well. There's some documentation like specific hiring documentation that you're not going to be able to do until after you actually offer somebody a job, or bring them in and hire them. But there are also things that that you can at least think about and plan for ahead of time. And the other thing that I'll put in a pitch for, we can help you in terms of different types of things that you should think through. But there are, depending on how big you think you're going to grow and how many employees you're going to have, there are companies out there that can handle some of those HR related functions for you, so that you don't have to do that yourself, that have the expertise and the people that can do it for you. So again, depending on how big you think you're going to be, that might be something you want to consider as well.
And I was also going to add to that, Paul, that we are not tax attorneys, and we are not CPAs, but in the Charleston office for certain, we have a resource list that provides information on CPAs and accounting groups as well as attorneys. So that might be something when you get into hiring multiple employees and things of that nature. It's always good to have a bookkeeper and an accountant. Is that something you would agree with, Paul?
100%, yes.
All right, so let's see. I'm developing a mobile medical company. Would I need licensing everywhere?
Potentially. I mean, that's something where you're at the very least going to want to check with the individual jurisdictions that you're going to be working in, so that you can make sure that you know what the requirements are. For example, if you're going to be primarily working in Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester County, say, I would at least check with those three and make sure you know what their requirements are. And some of them might have different kinds of licensing requirements for mobile businesses. And that's why you're going to want to check, because I know, for example, and it's not the same thing, but I know that with food trucks, for example, that some places have, more like temporary mobile operating permits that are a little different from, more formal business licenses. So it really just kind of depends on the area.
And also, Natasha asked about multiple states. We can only speak to the state of South Carolina.
Right.
So I would, if you're looking at expanding your mobile business into other states, you can always reach out to that state Small Business Development Center, and they would be able to answer that question for you.
100%. Yep.
Let's see, if you're creating a real estate business to own the property of your main business, how would the document preparation change?
Okay, so if you are, so let's say the real estate company, so it sounds like this is almost like a holding company kind of situation. So let's say that the real estate company is your primary. Well, then you could form that as, let's say you did an LLC, whatever you wanted to call it. And then up under that LLC, you could put the name of your business, and that's where potentially a DBA, a doing business as, could come in, where you could separate out different kinds of companies under that one LLC. So in other words, you could have one that holds the real estate and one that holds the business itself. Or alternatively, another way you could do it is you could actually set them up as separate business entities, and you could lease the property from one to the other. So in other words, you would set up the LLC for owning the property. You would set up some kind of legal structure for the business itself that's going to occupy that property, and then have the have the business lease the space from the property LLC. So and there's different ways to look at that organization. And that might be something, I mean, we can certainly point you in some directions with the best advice on how to do some of those things. But I'll reiterate what Carolyn said a little bit ago. We're not attorneys, and so when you sort of get into something like some of the more complicated property and legal structures, we might sometimes advise you to go seek actual legal advice on from an attorney on what the best structure for you might be.
Thank you, Paul. And I'm responding to someone right now about certification, so I'll send everyone that response. Here we go. As a sole proprietor, I keep an Excel spreadsheet for profit and loss. What is the best way I can show that I pay myself and have income when asked for an income statement? Oh, that's a great question. And we've had a lot of discussions about that since COVID hit. Have we not, Paul?
We have. So, there's a couple different ways to do that. Some people actually make themselves a W-2 employee and they pay themselves. If you don't do that, the other thing you can do is do what's called an owner draw. So what you would do is you would show on your ledger, on your Excel sheet, what your owner draw is. You would put that amount in there, however often you take one. I mean, some people pull money out of the business every month. Some people pull it every quarter. Some people pull it every week. Some people pull it at the end of the year, depending on how much their business has left over at the end of the year. But what you want to do is you want to show some kind of owner draw on there somewhere to show how much you are pulling out of the business. And another thing that I'll add to this is where it gets really, I think, crucial to have a separate business account from your personal account, because what you can do then is give yourself an owner draw where you take a certain amount of money out of the business account and you put it in your personal account. Because what some people do is they just pay their personal expenses, be it their mortgage or their their car note or whatever it is, out of their personal account. Well, the problem is, and a lot of people ran into this when they were applying for the PPP or something like that, that doesn't prove business income or payroll out of the business, which then means that you're not eligible for that stuff. So if you're going to do a draw in such a way that you document that draw on your Excel, your ledger, whatever it is, as an owner draw, and then take that money out of your business account, put it into your personal, so that when you then show your personal bank statement, you can say, see, here it is. I gave myself an owner draw and here's the personal money. So then it becomes personal income. And I know that that's a little bit convoluted, but believe me, when it goes to doing taxes or paying or applying for financing, you'll be glad you did.
And I believe that was our last question. Does anyone else have any questions or anything? Well, it doesn't appear. Many people are thanking you, Paul. Great presentation. Paul's contact information is here on the screen. That is also my number. I'm Carolyn Strange. I am the region coordinator. So if you have any questions, if you want to know who at your local area would be providing information from the Small Business Development Center, I can direct you in the correct way, and I would be more than happy to do so. There is one last question.
Sure.
Oh, thank you, Beth. She said, I am calling to set up a meeting ASAP.
That's
Thank
great.
you. Thank you. That is awesome. So lots of thank yous. Great information. Appreciate you all. Thank you, Ruth. Ruth Jordan from the city of Charleston is on our call today. She's one of our resource partners, and we're always thrilled when she attends. So thank you so much, Ruth. You know we're here for you. And I believe that's everything. So thank you again. We will be sending out a post-event survey. And to everyone that responds to the post-event survey, we will be sending the presentation slides. We will give you until about Monday afternoon to get that survey back to us, and then Robert Jones and I will be sending out these slides. We have also recorded this event, and we will be placing the recording on our state staff site, which is scsbdc.com. It generally takes about 10 to 14 days to get that posted. So once that is available to all, I will follow back around and send out that recording link to everyone in case you would like to review it or even potentially share it with someone that was unable to attend. So thank you, everyone. That concludes the presentation. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
And we will see you next time. Thank you.